Imagine you've spent years training for a race. You've invested everything: time, money, national pride, and just when you're about to overtake the leader, your own team grabs you by the shoulder and tells you to stop. Exactly that, is what is happening to China with artificial intelligence. Just over a year ago, the world woke up to a massive surprise. China launched DeepSeek, an AI model that suddenly challenged Silicon Valley's supposed absolute dominance. And that was only the beginning. Alibaba introduced Qwen, a family of models capable of coding, analyzing documents, and building autonomous agents. ByteDance, the company behind TikTok, launched Doubao AI, a conversational assistant that swept through the Chinese market. And then came Qwen, an AI specialized in generating hyper-realistic video so convincing it left half the internet speechless. Suddenly, the AI race was no longer a head-to-head between OpenAI and Google. China had entered the track, and it had done so with force. So what happened? Why is the same government that fueled all of that now throwing obstacles in its own path? What does Xi Jinping know that the rest of us don't see yet? Today, we're going to answer exactly those questions. And I'll tell you this much in advance. The answer has far less to do with technology and far more to do with fear. Let's get into it. Earlier this year, something very strange happened in China. Hundreds of people lined up outside Tencent's offices to install OpenClaw, an AI agent capable of executing tasks directly from your computer. The scene looked surreal. People waiting for hours, as if it were an iPhone launch, but for artificial intelligence software. The enthusiasm was real, the hype enormous. But at the very same time those lines were forming in the streets, something very different was happening online. Searches for the word anxiety related to AI on WeChat jumped from 20,000 daily searches to nearly 2 million overnight. That's not a trend. That's a social panic in fast forward, and the data backs it up. According to a survey by a Chinese state media outlet, 6 out of every 10 citizens fear that artificial intelligence will take their job. 6 out of 10. In a country of 1.4 billion people, that is an enormous political pressure. So the government acted. First, it banned or severely restricted the use of OpenClaw in banks and strategic sectors, citing national security risks. Then it extended those restrictions further. And then came the most direct blow of all. A high-profile court in Hangzhou ruled that companies cannot fire workers simply to replace them with artificial intelligence. A tech company that had tried to reassign an employee and slash their salary because their role could be automated lost the case. The court ruled it an illegal dismissal. This wasn't a small claims court. This was a clear political signal from the highest judicial levels in the country. But to understand why this matters so much, you need to understand the state of China's labor market. And the answer is, it's in a very fragile place. China today faces 3 major economic problems that feed into each other: the real estate bubble, weak domestic consumption, and youth unemployment. And that last one is the one that hurts the most politically. Between 2018 and 2023, the unemployment rate among young people aged 16 to 24 doubled, surpassing 20%. And here's the detail that completely changes how you see this problem. We're not talking about young people without qualifications. We're talking about engineers, business administration graduates, people who studied a degree and now compete against 1 million candidates for a single job opening. How far has it gone? This far. More than 20% of delivery drivers on China's 2 largest food delivery platforms hold a university degree. And from 2022 onward, at least 70,000 of those drivers held a master's degree. A master's degree, delivering food on a bicycle. That's not just an economic data point. That's a social time bomb. And in that context, artificial intelligence isn't perceived as an opportunity. It's perceived as the next threat. Because a study from Peking University confirms that the sectors in China most exposed to AI are already hiring fewer people. Not in the future. Right now, the labor problem isn't limited to office jobs either. It has spilled into the streets. Literally. You may have heard of robotaxis. In the United States, Waymo is growing rapidly. In China, Baidu had what was arguably the most ambitious autonomous vehicle fleet in the world with its Apollo Go program. But then two things happened that changed everything. First, around 100 of Baidu's autonomous vehicles stopped simultaneously in the middle of the road due to a system failure. The result was total chaos across the streets of Wuhan. An entire city paralyzed by a bug. Second, just days later, a similar incident, smaller in scale but impossible to ignore, happened again. Two failures in less than 2 weeks. Chinese authorities responded by freezing robo-taxi licenses. Shares in companies across the sector fell between 10 and 30% in the year to date. Now, everyone is asking the same question. Was this a purely technical response to safety failures? Or did the government use those incidents as political cover to calm the protests of taxi drivers, who had been applying pressure for months? The honest answer is probably both, at the same time. And that ambiguity is telling. At this point, someone might think China is about to walk away from the AI race entirely. But that would be a serious misreading of what's actually going on. For Xi Jinping, artificial intelligence is not a technology project. It is a matter of national sovereignty, a race that China, for now, is losing. How big is the gap? Let's make it concrete. DeepSeek 4 Pro, China's most advanced model, takes 150 seconds to generate 500 words of response. Claude Opus 4.5, which isn't even Anthropic's most powerful model, does it in 25 seconds. And ChatGPT 5.1, also not the latest from OpenAI, does it in 30. That's not a minor gap. That is 6 times slower. There's more. On general intelligence benchmarks, DeepSeek needs to consume up to 270 million tokens to match the score that GPT 5.5 achieves using just 9 million. Picture it this way. It's like a car that needs 30 times more fuel than another to travel the same distance. It might get there, but at a completely different cost. And then there's the chip problem. China wants to build a fully homegrown AI ecosystem, with semiconductors manufactured domestically by companies like Huawei. And there are real advances. Huawei has grown its chip sales by 60% annually, and between a quarter and a third of the silicon wafers used in China are now of national origin. The goal is to surpass 70% before 2030. But China's most advanced domestic chips still don't match NVIDIA's. And the most revealing detail of all is this. It's estimated that between 300,000 and 1.2 million NVIDIA graphics cards have been smuggled into China, meaning that to train its best AI models, China still depends, at least in part, on American components it can't even legally import. In terms of total computing power, all of China has roughly the same capacity as Oracle, the 5th largest American company by installed computing capacity, behind Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Meta. And so we arrive at the real dilemma. A dilemma with no easy exit. On one side, Xi Jinping knows that stepping back from the AI race would mean surrendering a strategic advantage China cannot afford to lose. AI is not the future. It is the present. And whoever dominates that technology will shape the global economy for decades to come. On the other side, he's looking at a generation of highly educated young people, university graduates, master's degree holders, who cannot find work, who watch automation consume jobs before they ever had the chance to fill them, and who increasingly associate the words artificial intelligence with the word threat. That is the real game China is playing right now. It's not technology versus regulation. It's progress versus stability. And in a system where political legitimacy depends heavily on maintaining social peace, that second variable carries enormous weight. How will it end? Nobody knows for certain. But one thing is clear: the model of technological development at any cost, with no safety net for workers, no longer commands the same consensus it did just 2 years ago. Not in China, and increasingly, not anywhere else in the world either. China placed a massive bet on AI. The world applauded. Now the Chinese people themselves are setting conditions. And Xi Jinping, who built his entire narrative around technological progress as a source of national pride, must find a way to move forward without leaving too many people behind. When you think about it carefully, that is not an exclusively Chinese problem. And that is exactly the question you should be asking yourself too. What did you make of today's analysis? Do you think Xi Jinping can hold the balance between innovation and social stability? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if this kind of content helps you understand the world a little better, you already know what matters more than any algorithm: sharing it with someone who cares about the same things.